somebody who may need to put a lot of garbage in a dandy dumpster up in Washington, D.C. They're joining us right now. It's Congressman Jodey Arrington.
There are not enough dandy dumpsters in the world to hold some of the garbage coming out of our nation's capital, but there's a new era. A new day has dawned on America, and I'm so grateful, I want to say, for the opportunity to represent West Texas. And it's great to be with you, Chad, and your listeners, and it's just great to be back home.
Well, it's great to have you here in studio. I know you've been busy. You've been we were talking earlier, and someone was joking with you about having a whole week off, but you've been busy. You've been going around to Abilene, to Plainview. I mean, just all over the district. And talking with folks, a lot of ag producers. What are folks having to say to you?
Well, first of all, this is our first full week back, believe it or not, in the first 50 days. So we've got an aggressive agenda, a legislative agenda. We've got a Republican president. We got a Republican Congress, and we're staying up there longer to get as much to the president's desk as we can, especially with these midnight rules that were passed and that 60-day windows. And by the way, that's Second Amendment rights stuff. That's education and states' rights and flexibility for states with respect to education. It's oil and gas overregulation. So it affects almost every facet of our life in West Texas, and so it's important we're there. But we've been to the Farm and Ranch Show in Abilene. We've been out to Seminole, which was both ag and energy, lots of oil and gas, talking to small businesses and local family farmers, and their message is the same. This is an exciting time. Thank you for rolling back these regulations because they're crushing the small businessman. Thank you for repealing Obamacare. Finish the job because it is actually destroying or decimating the rural community hospitals, which these rural communities and our ability to bring the food, fuel, and fiber to Americans. So I think it's mostly been very positive. I think there's concern about the Farm Bill, especially with cotton, and the message has been the same for the last year and a half. It was a mistake to pull cotton out of the Farm Bill, get it back as a covered commodity, a Title I covered commodity, so it has a safe, and we don't let China and others run us out of the cotton making business. And it's again, we heard a lot of these things in our campaign. Just like with President Trump, we're trying to deliver on what we said, and so far, I think we're off to a great start, including our committee assignments.
You have opened up, or it's been opened up, the at least talk about a new Farm Bill, and recently I know you were discussing in Washington, D.C. some of the challenges facing rural Texans, not only rural Texans, but really rural America. Talk to us a little bit about that and how that compares to what you're hearing, even today. I know you were talking with some ag folks today here in Lubbock. So how does all of that come together, and how do you get that message across to D.C. if they haven't gotten the message yet that rural America does matter?
Well, that's my single central message is rural America matters to this country. It matters from an economic perspective. It matters from a national security perspective, and it matters again not just because we're the breadbasket or just because we're the energy basin, but because we're the backbone of this country. In my opinion, strong opinion, our traditional American values is what made America great. Not necessarily just our economy, not just because we have the greatest military in the world, but because we believe in freedom, we believe in the Constitution, we believe in hard work and personal responsibility. So that's been the message, and in every venue, whether it's budget and talking about how these major budget drivers are gobbling up our domestic investment in transportation and other things, whether it's on that first committee hearing we had on ag was the state of rural America, and the farming income is down over 50% the last 3 years. And so when you have trade deals that are not altogether fair and put us on an even playing field, when you have markets in our country that are much more expensive to produce, that's reg, tax, labor, and the list goes on, where China doesn't have it, Brazil doesn't have those costs. So you got to have a farm bill. And I think we're seeing hopefully the data will be compelling for the representatives from urban and suburban to say, yeah, you know what, we rely on a safe, abundant, and affordable supply of food too. So let's get that farm bill right. Let's get the safety net right so that we provide support for the farmer, but we also do it in a fiscally responsible way. And I'm excited because I get to work with a fellow West Texan. I'm excited in Mike Conaway. I'm excited about working with a Secretary of Agriculture who actually comes from cotton country as well, Sonny Perdue. Mm-hmm. He hasn't been confirmed yet, but I'm hopeful he will. And most of all, I'm excited to work with a president who wants to make American producers and American manufacturers, he wants to put them first. And that's long overdue. So I think all those things, Chad, are lining up well for a strong, good farm bill, which means a strong, healthy, viable rural economy.
When we come back, we'll have much more to talk about with Congressman Jodey Arrington. Back on the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 95.1 FM, 790 AM KFYO. In studio with me right now, it's Congressman Jodey Arrington. And Congressman, I think one of the big questions that they keep popping up, and it's about all members of Congress, it's about Congress in general, and that is, when are we going to see a repeal and replace, or repeal? Something happened with Obamacare, something happened with tax cuts. There's, I think, a feeling building within some Republicans that Congress is moving too slow. We've got the White House, we've got Congress, we've got the House, we've got the Senate, we've got the White House. So what's the timeline, and from what you're hearing, and what can people reasonably expect as far as tax cuts and Obamacare and some of the big issues that all Republicans campaigned on?
Sure, and it's a fair question, and there are different parts to that. One is I'm on the Budget Committee, the only Texas Republican on the Budget Committee where we initiated Obamacare repeal. Now, it's got to go to these authorizing committees, Ways and Means, Energy and Commerce, and they're working it up to get as much of the repeal through this budgetary mechanism as possible. You can't do all the repeal in this with this procedure. It's just the law. And so we've got, we can do away with the individual mandate, the employer mandate, and we can do some replace on expanding, for example, the tax credits and the health savings accounts, for example. But there are lots of things like arbitrary barriers that inhibit competition between states. That's policy. So what does that mean? That means you have to have 60 votes in the Senate. That means it's a whole different animal and a whole different ball game. If it just takes 51 Republicans, we can move that to the president's desk rather easily. That's going to happen, I think, over the next couple months. But we're waiting for the authorizers to give it back to us at the Budget Committee, okay, and then to vote on it and get it out and moving. You've got Tom Price, the new Secretary of Health and Human Services, former chairman of the Budget Committee, who's going to do a whole lot. Because unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, a lot of discretion was given to the regulators and to the CMS types and to the Secretary of Health and Human Services. So a lot of administrative scrubbing is going to happen. That will repeal and reform a lot of it, maybe a bulk of it. And then we're going to be left with the sort of let small businesses band together to have greater purchase power, lift the arbitrary barriers to competition. We want market forces. We want people, consumers, you and me, patients and your listeners, to be empowered where health insurance companies are competing for their business. And they have lots of products to choose from, not just the ones designed by some federal bureaucrat in Washington. As I said in my first floor speech, Soviet-style central planning of our healthcare economy has failed. It failed the Soviet Union. It failed here under Barack Obama. I'm not suggesting that healthcare didn't need to be reformed prior to President Obama. I'd just say he hit the accelerator with ACA. So the other thing, this is a big part of it, and we're debating it right now, but I want, and I think most Republicans do, want to get the Medicaid in a block grant to the states. We have no fiscal responsibility. First of all, we could end this discussion with, where are we getting the money to expand health care, period? We're $20 trillion in debt. But we don't have a balanced budget amendment. That's a huge problem. Texas does. Let Texas design their health care system on the Medicaid side, give them a block grant. If they want to add to it, great. If they don't, but we don't have the money to just keep expanding this. In the end, it will hurt our economy and future Americans with higher taxes, et cetera.
So things are moving, just not as quickly as everybody wants.
Yeah, but let's be clear though. It took years to get here.
Yeah.
Let's be reasonable and let's move fast, but let's move responsibly, because there are a lot of people that took advantage of the current system, and we need to be careful as we unwind this.
The former speaker, John Boehner, you probably saw his comments where he laughed and said that Obamacare was never going to be replaced. Disagree?
Well, I would tell you I don't even like the word replacement, because replacement suggests that we're going to have another top-down federal government solution to this problem. I think we've got to replace it, if you will, with market forces, state flexibility, empowering the consumer. To me, that's more reform. That's more repair. So, it's hard for me to answer that other than to tell you I don't like replace. But I do think, and I want your listeners to know, the market's the best way to solve most problems. But the market won't solve all problems. That's why you have government. So the limited role could be applied in one example, pre-existing conditions. Mm-hmm. The market won't solve that. So we need high-risk pools or some mechanism to assist people that have pre-existing conditions. I think that's important. I think most Republicans feel that way.
There's been a movement, the indivisible movement, that's been taking over some GOP town halls around the country. Any plans for you to have a town hall anytime soon?
Well, I think it's important to give venue to people to speak their minds and to address concerns that they have. People who voted for me, people who didn't vote for me, Republicans, Democrats. It's unfortunate that a few, and I don't think it's the majority, I think there are a few people with this indivisible movement or whatever they're called who have come in and they have created, they've disrupted these town halls to the point that you can't have a candid and constructive conversation. So the answer is yes, we're going to have a venue where we give people the opportunity to address their concerns to me and let me listen mostly, and then talk about why I made the vote, why I made a statement, and I'm happy to stand by all of it. I'm proud of what we've been able to do, even in the short time.
So town hall at some point.
Yeah, what we've talked about is if you have the town hall, you're susceptible to this movement you're talking about. We've all seen it,
right.
And it compromises the dialogue with people who are sincerely there to have a dialogue. So we're going to have open office hours, I think, to start. We'll see how it goes from there and let people in several at a time. And we're not going to have cameras so that we don't turn it into, theater, that we actually have a constructive dialogue. I think it's important. And, I don't have all the answers. And quite frankly, I need to hear from Republicans. And I need to hear from Democrats. I have some great friends that are Democrats. And look, if you can't stand by your decisions and your positions, then, you ought not be in this business.
Back on Obamacare real quick, and I know we only have about a minute left or so. As far as a definitive answer on Obamacare, is it going to be gotten rid of within the next year or two?
51 votes, everything we can do to repeal the facets that can be repealed through this reconciliation is going to happen. That's going to happen.
Right.
Lots of stuff's going to happen administratively. The rest of it, which requires 60 votes, I believe it's going to happen. It's going to require us to have some bipartisan support. You got to get 8 Democrats at least, because we may lose some Republicans, so maybe 10, 15. That's going to be harder. That's going to take longer. So I want to manage people's expectations. But a whole lot can be done through reconciliation, already initiated, and the administrative efforts by Tom Price.
How do you think the president's doing so far?
I think he's doing great in the sense that he's doing everything that he said he would do. So I can't imagine anybody being surprised, although that appears that some are. He's got to grow into the job just like I do. And could he roll things out more smoothly? Could he communicate more effectively? Yeah, I think he could. I mean, in all honesty. But his policies are right on. And finally, we have somebody in recent history who is in politics and who goes to Washington and does what he said he was going to do. That is refreshing. That is why people sent him to shake it up and to create an environment that is not business as usual.
We have 1 minute left. Music's rolling. What's next for Congressman Arrington? Where do you go from here and next week?
We're more reforming. Tax reform is coming up. We'll talk about that in, I think, the weeks ahead. That's a big one to get our economy going and get Americans back to work.
All right. Congressman, thanks for your time. Always appreciate it.
God bless West Texas.